Hi everyone, welcome to another culture and identity revision video. This one is on postmodernism and their views on culture and identity. Just as with all other videos that I've done, these are just suggested possible paragraphs that you could do. It doesn't mean that you have to use these. It doesn't mean that anything that you wanted to use isn't necessarily right. These are just 4 or 5 very simple, straightforward paragraphs that I think that you could use to help you demonstrate postmodernist views. I think a really useful way for you to start your essay, if it was a 20 marker, would be an introduction, which just outline the postmodernist views on culture, maybe talk about how we've moved away from traditional views on the position of men and women, on class, etc., leading on from that modernism through to postmodernism. Krux, Pakulski, and Walters talk about how, particularly in the aftermath of the civil rights movements, of the feminist movements, of Equal Pay Act, Divorce Reform Act, we start seeing a divide in the breakdown of those lines between individuals within society and also culture. So, for instance, between men and women, or high and popular culture. And this is particularly enhanced in the 1990s, where we've got the enhancements of technology, such as the introduction of the internet. But even before that, we've got like cable TV, Sky TV, MTV culture, stuff like that, and the rise in consumer culture, which is covered in a different video. So please check that out in terms of consumer culture. So the first paragraph I want to talk about is how we have an increased cultural diversity in society. So this is basically meaning that we are no longer just fixed to our traditional culture based on where we live, what our class is, what our parents' jobs are, things like that. But actually, because of an increase in technology and more access to a global library, we've got greater access to other cultures. We can get influence from other cultures, and therefore we're not kind of set in our culture for the rest of our lives. Some examples that we could talk about would be around, say, music, fashion, football. You know, who would have thought that even 10 years ago, the women's game would be so big as it is now, with so much media attention, so many more fans going to see it. Um, in terms of fashion, we've got fashions coming from all over the world. You know, we think, say, like baseball caps would be a good example. You know, very much traditionally, culturally linked to the United States of America. But people in the United Kingdom, people all over the world would use them. Music such as K-pop, sung in a different language, becoming really popular and accessible to people in different parts of the world. In terms of analysis of that, this should can go to help us understand how there is an increase in diversity becoming important and individualism become important, even though we may have a shared culture, and a shared culture may be desirable. Remember, postmodernists are not necessarily saying that we have to move away from shared culture. They're saying it is still desirable, but within that there is a diversity and individualism. However, we could argue that this fails to recognize that in many cultures, many religions, many parts of the world, traditional cultures are still important, if not the most important thing. You know, people may access more postmodern, sorry, cultures. However, they will still partake in traditional cultures such as Diwali, Eid, summer solstice on the 21st of June, things like that. There's just some of those examples I would be talking about. Next thing that you could talk about would be the the merging of high and popular culture. So traditionally, cultures were a lot of the time split based on social class. So those who had access to high culture were from the upper classes. Those who accessed popular or low culture were from the lower classes and working classes. And what postmodernists say is that there's becoming a more of a blur between those things. So some examples to help us understand this blur that we can use in our application would be, say, Vivienne Westwood shoes, which is, you know, a designer label, very desirable, costs a bit of money, but just everyday students using them for school, wearing them for school. So, you know, what high culture would normally be associated with these designer labels, they've become the popular culture. Strictly Come Dancing is a really good example as well. This is ballroom dancing. This is generally reserved for the high cultures, dinner, big soirees and gatherings and stuff like that. But it's now into the popular culture through being shown on BBC and things like that. We've also got TV programs like University Challenge or Only Connect, which are quite highbrow, very difficult, high IQ needed, and all of those kind of things, which is generally associated with high culture. Again, moving into the popular culture scene through TV programs. Just a couple more examples as well would be, say, Bob Dylan, who was a folk musician from the 1960s all the way through until quite recently when he's been releasing material, winning the Nobel Prize for Literature. Now, this is just a folk singer who was singing songs and writing songs about war, so anti-war protest, civil rights movement protest songs, getting a Nobel Prize, which is normally just for the elite. And then you've got Tracy Emin's infamous unmade bed art installation. So she created this piece of art, inverted commas, which is called Unmade Bed, which is just basically like loads of stuff lying around on a floor in a bed, like looking a bit skanky. And this was put up for auction, £2 million. Now, art is normally associated with that higher culture, but this has shown that it's entering the popular culture scene. As an analysis, we could talk about how that this shows that in postmodernism, in a postmodern world, there's no defined culture based on our class anymore. It goes against the Marxist argument. However, you could argue against this by saying it's not actually accessible or desirable to all. So maybe this class still exists in terms of allowing us access via a financial material wealth to be able to access these things. Okay, a third thing that we could talk about would be an increase in style over substance in a postmodern world. So David Harvey talks about how it's not necessarily the thing that is important, it's what the thing looks like and the image that it sends out. We could link in Goffman to this, I think, and how we are using props such as clothing, such as any material item, to try to show the world like who we are, and rather than buying things for the usefulness, so buying a coat to keep us warm, buying shoes to protect our feet, we're actually doing it because we want the world to see the type of coat that we buy, maybe designer, because we're more bothered about how it looks. In terms of some application examples, you could talk about the beauty industry. You know, you can buy quite cheap makeup from Superdrug, own brand Superdrug, and B&M's and places like that. Or you can go high end, Charlotte Tilbury, these designers, etc. What the reason why you would buy, say, Fenty Beauty, which is Rihanna's brand, is because it is Rihanna's brand and it is seen as a desirable brand. The picture on the bottom right hand corner there is a jacket by a company called CP Company, an Italian designer company, and their thing is to have goggles in their hats, their hoods, etc., which is to represent, like, being used in the mountains and to protect yourself. I've lived in the northeast of England for many years, and although the weather's not particularly great here, I have never lived through a moment in time where it is needed to have some stormproof goggles on a hood. The reason why people would buy this, and Stone Island and other kind of brands, is to just show a look to the people. Look at me, everybody. I can afford these clothes. I'm on top of these trends. This shows how, unlike functionalism, culture is not based on this collective good anymore. It's more about individuals and their desire to look a certain way, and it's about their identity. Look at me. I'm rich, I'm successful, I can afford these things. Marxists would criticize this postmodernist view, however, and say that this isn't showing necessarily an individualism, but actually this is showing the result of being forced into a certain identity and into a culture as part of the false class consciousness, making you think that you have choice, making you think that you have a decision to make over your identity and who you want to be. But actually, it is the brands, it is the media, it is the ruling classes who are forcing this upon you. Okay. The other one I wanted to talk about would be Baudrillard's hyperreality. So this is the idea that we're unable in a postmodern world to distinguish between reality and hyperreality and simulation. And this links into culture and identity because we're forming an identity based on what we think we should be doing. And this is causing a bit of a conflict because actually the reality is not like the hyperreality, it's not achievable. So if we think about Britney Spears' picture there, completely photoshopped, makes her look a lot different to the photo there, and the enhancement of this photograph here of Justin Bieber, making people think that I want to achieve that body, that's for me to be successful, for me to get a girlfriend or whatever, I need to look like that, but actually it's not achievable. Even Justin Bieber doesn't even look like that. Other examples you could talk about would be, say, deepfakes, and you know how people use fake information on the TV to try to create an ideology within people, and that then becomes your identity. Hikikomori is an interesting one because this is basically where there's a culture of people who kind of remove themselves from mainstream culture, they remove themselves from the outside world, and they live their lives through an online culture, and that becomes their identity. We can analyze this by saying that it shows that culture doesn't have to exist just in the real world, but we can also have an online culture and online identity. And Baudrillard is also very useful in helping us understand the dangers of this. So actually, the problems that it can cause in terms of not understanding exactly the difference between reality and hyperreality. An evaluation of this could be that there is an issue separating between reality and non-reality, and the dangers that brings, but also that some cultures are actually disadvantaged because of this, because they are misrepresented, especially if you think about the way that certain cultures, like say migrants and the cultures of migrants coming into, say, Britain, and how the certain newspapers or social medias might misrepresent them. But because we're bombarded with it so much, we don't know if it's real or if it's not real, and we start believing it, and then that can become a problem. The last thing I wanted to talk about very quickly is just the postmodernist view on socialization. So traditionally, we get our socialization from our families, primary socialization, and agents of socialization, such as education, the government, and things like that. Postmodernists believe that in today's society, we have so much information that we can actually choose who we listen to, choose who we get our socialization, and also resist socialization from other places. So, for example, we could talk about how the global library will give us one version of a society, and we can decide whether or not we agree or we disagree with that, and then we can go somewhere else and look for that information. And social media has probably become the biggest form of socialization for nearly everybody. So we can say that we're moving away from those traditional institutions. They're less important in a postmodernist world, and we're getting our socialization from elsewhere. However, you could argue that it overestimates how much we can resist this. The Marxists would argue that the ruling classes either use or they own the majority of the media. In the United Kingdom, 90% of the print media is owned by three people. 40% of the digital media is owned by those same three people. So basically what it means is that it gives them a lot more opportunity to push their ideologies, to push their socialization. So the argument that no, we can pick and choose our socialization where we get it from, maybe that's a bit overestimated. I'm hoping that you found this video useful. If you've got any comments, any questions, please leave them in that section. Look out for some of the other videos. We'll be putting a lot more culture and identity videos up as well. Okay, thanks for listening. Take care. Bye.